Thelma and I were supposed to be up here showing you slides of buildings with paintings on the side, but we ran into another opportunity. One of my bus riders that I drive every other Thursday, Miss Lucille, I didn't get to call her today.
I called and she had something else.
Well, Miss Lucille was about 90-some years old, and just as sweet as she could be, told me that I should talk to this lady here who lives out there in the same complex she does. And I said, why is that? She said, this lady was present at the Nuremberg trial. And I said, how could that be? That was a century ago. It got very interested, and I talked to her here in Myrtle, and she volunteered to be our guest speaker for today to tell us her experiences and where she came from in the United States and where she went and what she saw and some things like that. And before I came, I went to the internet and I looked some things up, and I found a directory of personnel.
She wanted to be sure I was in it.
Directory of personnel.
She's sharp.
And listed in there, of course it didn't say Allenbaum because she didn't go over there as an Allenbaum, but there is a Myrtle R. Bryant in here. So when I talked to her again and she was telling me some things on the phone, I asked her if her name used to be Bryant. She said yes. So I said, well, I've got a directory here that lists you, and the street name that you had to pronounce it for me that reads after this, I couldn't say it, but we'll have to pronounce it.
Prince would get Nuremberg.
Yeah, that. Okay. Myrtle has brought some memorabilia up here. These are books that are kind of sensitive in terms of their structure, so we won't want to pass them around or anything. She's brought them for us to look at. And without anything else, I'll ask Myrtle to come up here and give us some remarks on the subject. Okay.
Thank you. I never expected you to be so young. And I am. And I was at the trials. I worked there. And here I'm looking at you and the trials. But anyway, I have this little thing, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing. But all this week I've been so interested in telling you something about Nuremberg that I kept this little thing and I kept writing notes in it. Now the first note I do have is the war was over and we had two types of trials. One was the International Military Tribunal, which was Germany and Russia, France, and the United States. Then the second trial, which was the one I was in, was the Nuremberg war crimes trials. And that was I left the United States in 1947. And of course, I had lived in Memphis all my life. I was working for Public Health Service, and the government sent out a brochure, and oh boy, a brochure. And my friends and I signed it, and the three of us were selected to go to Nuremberg. Now that's not true. We were selected to go to military government in Berlin. So what happened was that we got on the ship, and I can't tell you enough about the ship. The ship was just wonderful. We were sicker than 14 dogs. We didn't think we would live to get there.
What kind of a ship? I'm sorry. What kind
It
of a ship?
was a hospital ship, and it had now been worked over so that the dependents could be brought in. Now, here's the men that were stationed in Europe. Their families were brought over. I don't know whether you knew that or not. And they had housing for them. Where did they get the housing? The people that lived in the houses moved to the basement, and the Americans took over and lived in the houses. So when we got out there and finally got over being sick, and we landed in Bremerhaven. Cold. I've never seen such a cold day in my life. People just sitting there. And I thought, Lord, what have I done now? But anyway, we got off and we went into town, spent the night there, and then we were told the next morning, be ready, and we are going to Berlin. Because we were originally signed up to come to Berlin and work in military government. So we got in there, we drove, and then we got to Berlin. And we went over to the Office of Military Government. As and there were 6 of us. And that's a mistake to begin with, to put 6 crazy people together. And we got in there, and we were just so excited. We wanted to know just where we were going to be and what we were going to be doing. And she said, well, we're so glad to have you here in Germany. It is so nice to have you in Berlin. But I'm sorry. We're going to lose 6 of you right to begin with because you're going to have to go to Nuremberg. The trials are on, and the judges come ahead of anybody else. So you are going to Nuremberg to work on the war crimes trial. Well, someone was wise, and I don't believe it was me, but I hope it was, said, wait a minute, we're in Berlin just for one day, and we're not going to get to see anything. So the lady said, oh, call Red Cross. She called Red Cross, and they sent a bus out for us. There were 8 or 9 of us on the bus, and we had the best-looking Dutch guy you've seen. He could speak real good English. So he started taking us around. I can't tell you what it's like. I cannot tell you what it's like to go into a place that has been bombed and bombed and bombed. It was just the biggest mess you've ever seen. And he knew where the places were, what they were. And so then I kept saying, but I want to go to the field where they have the big swastika. And he said, but there isn't one. I said, oh, I saw it on TV. Yes, there is. Oh, that's in Nuremberg. That's not in Berlin. This is the Olympic Stadium here in Berlin. So then he got us on around. He said, now I'm going to take you down in the bunker where Hitler killed himself. So we got out and we went down. We're down in the bunker, and I think you probably all know. First of all, he killed his dog. He poisoned him, shot his dog. He killed Eva Braun. I understand he did marry her before he shot her. And then he also had the Dr. Goebbels, his propaganda minister, and I believe they had 6 or 7 children. The wife and the children, he shot them. They were all dead. So after that, they took, this is the guy telling us, they took them out, and they did not want the Russians to get them. So he showed us now. Right here, at this place on the ground, see that? That's where they burned them. And he said, but you know, you can't burn a dead body with just gasoline. But anyway, somebody said, yeah, the Russians got them. Well, to tell you the truth, to this day, I don't know who got them, but I know that they were dead. And so then they said, okay, now y'all, we're going to put you on the train to go to Nuremberg. So we got off and got on the train, and we took off in the night, and we traveled on orders. We didn't carry a passport then. And we were told, now the Russians, you're going through the Russian sector, so be sure if they stop you, only hand them these orders, don't give them anything else. But, you know, it's real funny. The Russians had the industrial part of the country, and the Americans took the pretty part. We took down in Bavaria where everything was so beautiful, and all the mountains. But anyway, we got into Nuremberg, and so our adventure now is on its way. And we were met by this lady. She was Russian, and she had on a civilian military uniform. They were a khaki color. She met us there, and I think she had 22 porters. And she said, I'm taking you where you're going to live. That night, she took us right to the place, and that's where we're going to live. So the next morning, we got up, we had to go down to the hotel. So they took us to the hotel to have breakfast. In the meantime, we thought, where are we? And here we are in this big, big apartment building. It's about 5 stories high. Across the street is a park. The Pegnitz River flowed through the park. And there was a great statue of Bismarck. So we knew we were in one of the wealthier sections of Nuremberg. So we got on the bus, went down to breakfast, had breakfast, and then they said, now we're going to take you down to the Palace of Justice. That is the courthouse. It is a beautiful building. There are pictures here. I understand this building was hit 11 times, and it had to practically be rebuilt because we were going to use it for the trial. They had put in water, they put in heat, and they had to build up where it was all just pushed to pieces. So anyway, we had our breakfast, we went down there. When we got down there, the personnel officer said, well, now, I want to tell you, you're here. You'll never see the trees for the forest. And she said, but I'll tell you, I'm going to now send you to your jobs. And so she called us each one by name and sent us off. Well, she sent me off and she said, you go with her. So I went down there and I got to the office and it was Dr. Kempner. And he spoke very broken English. But how fortunate I was. Good Lord was looking after me. He died about 5 years ago. He was written up as one of the world's foremost jurists. He was a brilliant man. He was so brainy. So when I went in to him, he had on this civilian uniform. And he was sitting in his chair that looked like a king's throne, with red and his great desk. And he had a overstuffed chair here, and he told me to sit there. And he started talking to me. And then he looked at me and he said, Myrtle, do you understand me? And I said, oh, yes, I understand you. Oh, Lord. If anybody could understand you, because his English was so broken. And he said, you stay. And I said, okay. And I didn't know what he meant. He meant that he had taken that I was going to be his secretary. And y'all don't know how wonderful it was. He was so good to me. And of course, I adored the man. He just saw to everything. But he was in charge of the trial. So as being in charge of the trial, and he wasn't an easy man to work for, those people were scared to death. Nobody is going to go in there and do anything. And he said to me, Myrtle, I had an office with 4 German girls. Then the next room was 2 research analysts and this old German gentleman. He was also an attorney, and they said he was there going through the documents. He had turned state's evidence. And in the next room was Dr. Kempner's. And he said, Myrtle, you've got to keep them from coming in here. Said somebody will shoot me. And I thought he was kidding, but he wasn't. He really didn't. He really was concerned about somebody shooting him. But anyway, they brought in, they sent out people who work for intelligence to pick up the people that they wanted to bring in to question. Now, am I making good sense?
Yes.
And so they came into his office, but they didn't come into his office. They came into my office and with me and the 4 girls, and they sat there till he got ready to see them. And now, if that was all day and half the night, he let them sit there. But anyway, he went through all these things. And then he told me one day, he said, Myrtle, do you realize that you sit in your office every day with white-collar murderers? And I said, yeah. But he was telling me the truth. I really was. And then we get into the thing with the concentration camps. And this is a subject that I hate the most. Now, with me, we handled and worked, saw that the documents were done, but we did not sit in on the interrogations of the people that he interrogated. First of all, I didn't speak German, and they didn't speak English, and if they did, they weren't going to speak it to me, which most of them, because we had the high German officials, that's who we were trying for their crimes, war crimes, and they all spoke English. But nevertheless, I found that the worst, when they brought up the concentration camps, that was the place that I was ready to give up. I would not go. When they took a trip down to the concentration camps, I would not go. That's the thing. Going to the office just like you would here. We'd go in there, and the girls were there with me. I was in there, and then next door were 2 research analysts. And there was Dr. Gauss, who was the German who had turned state's evidence. Then there was Dr. Kempner's office. And on the other side, there was a lady who they handled the documents. They would get the documents. We had FBI men, CIC men, all those guys that went out and picked up the Germans who were brought in to be interrogated. Now, not all of them were put on trial, but the ones that were, they brought them in for us. In Nuremberg, that's where the statue was. I bet y'all have seen it. You know, it was a big stadium, and this great swastika was up there, and there's where Hitler spoke. And I finally saw it. But, fortunately, the American government had blown up the statue. They left the park there, of course. And I used to go out there and sit in the sun and think of all the little boys and all the little girls and all the soldiers that we saw march there, of all the times I saw Hitler up there. The thing that came to me was, how many of them ever came back? So, but it was a beautiful place. Then there was another place that they had all these stones that were marked. They were cut and they were marked. And they tell me that those were the stones where Germany had intended to take over the rule of the world, and there were going to be the offices for the various countries. So, then one time, the one trip that we did take and had a real good time, I'll tell you about it, was right after we got to Nuremberg. We took a trip to Czechoslovakia. But now, this time there were 6 of us, and we didn't know our way around anywhere. Not one of us spoke anything but English. So I had, one of my friends was working on a trial, and she couldn't get off, and I couldn't get off. So we told them, well, we'd come the next day. So we got on the train, and we were going huffing along, and the guard came through, and he said, do you ladies have any Czech money? And we said, well, yes, we do. You will kindly get off and go over to the customs, and you will turn your money in, because it has to be black market. I thought, how humiliating. We did. We had to walk over there, and we get into Czechoslovakia in the middle of the night, and we don't have a dime. We didn't have, but somebody, I don't know who, realized our predicament and got a taxi for us, and then we went to the hotel. Well, we haven't been dumb enough. So we get in the hotel, and we were starving. And so we got in there and got ready for bed, and then my friend said, you pull the cord now and turn the lights off. Okay. The lights didn't go off, the maid came. We said, well, she doesn't speak English either. And so we said, no, and she said, well, she gave up with us, and she went back, turned the lights out, and then as soon as she went back and we got in there, we pulled the cord, turned the lights, and here she came back. Finally, she was able to make us understand. But we did worse than that. The next morning, we had a bathroom by our room, and my friend went in the bathroom and locked the door. And she said, Myrtle, I can't get out. And I said, well, for heaven's sake. I said, well, let me try. And I couldn't get her out. And so she said, what are we going to do? I said, you know, there are 2 balconies out there. I said, I tell you what, you crawl out the window there, and I'll be over here and get... Well, thank goodness the Lord didn't let us do it, because one of us would have been killed for sure. Probably both of us. Here we were crawling and crawling. But finally, we got the door open, we got her out. It was a real thing. With me, it wasn't fun and games. We played hard, but we worked real hard. So we finally went to trial, and none of our defendants got life. They all got out within 10 years. And they were real bad days. But, by the way, I was living in Berlin. I was living in Nuremberg when the Berlin airlift went into effect. And that's when the United States government didn't let them get the best of us. We airlifted into Berlin, even the coal for winter. Everything went by air. And then I went out in the airlift myself. And 10 days after I got back to the United States, the airlift was removed. But I thought it was really something. It was, you saw them, it's just like cars. As far as this one moved up, that one went up, one came down. It was just, it was really something to see. Now, I'm ready to return to the United States. So they said, okay, we've got you scheduled for flight. And I said, I'm afraid to fly. Yeah, I'm talking to the personnel manager. I don't know when I was going to grow up and be a grown back. She said, you are not afraid to fly. I said, but I am afraid to fly. She said, Myrtle, you are a businesswoman. You are a woman of the world. And I thought, why, fudge, I am. Anyway, she said, Myrtle, I said, okay, I'll just fly. And if I get killed, I just get killed. Well, that didn't phase her, so we got together, and there were about, there were 5 of us. We were to be flown out because our trial was over. And they sent us to Frankfurt, and that's where we were flying out from, and we did fly out the airline. So we got there, and they said, okay, you're scheduled, and so, but come in, we got to give you your instructions. Well, we get in there. Here she comes in with this wetsuit, this rubber suit, and said, now, in case, and I thought, I'm not going to get on that plane, I'm not going to get on that plane. Well, down to the closing of the trial, and so we had, there's a break in there. And I saw where there was a trip on an Italian vessel to North Africa. I thought, just got to go. Oh, I took the ship out, went down through Italy, went to Mount Vesuvius, and across to, we can't think of the name of the place, and all across the ocean, and we docked in North Africa, in Alexandria. So I got to go to Egypt. And then from there, they had the train. We went down to Egypt, and guess what? I rode on a camel out to the pyramids. So my life has just been so completed with all these wonderful things. And you think, okay, that's what I think about. But in reality, I do think of those people who were so cruel, who were so horrible, who denied knowing anything. I did not know this till I came to Nuremberg. I hear this verse in Nuremberg, and we know they did. Because it was, those crematories and those, you could smell them for miles. But anyway, with the bad, and I hope that we did the good that we wanted to. I hope with our prosecution that we did the fair and the right thing. I know we did the fair and the right thing. It's living, if you can imagine, and it got to where it didn't bother you, with the ruins. Everything was in ruins when we got there. And they started building back.
How long were you there?
I was there 2 years.
Wow.
I got there just as our trial started, and I left right after our trial ended.
Remember, you indicated that most of them got relatively light sentences, wasn't it? Some of them committed suicide. Didn't Gore commit suicide?
Gore, he committed suicide, and this is something, I arrived there shortly after he did, and they were so disappointed. They were so terribly disappointed. This is something else that I read. Dr. Kempner, Goring had killed himself, and when our trial was ending up and they were going to have the end of the prosecution was going to bring in the verdict, Emmy Goring was going to be there with her child, and I told Dr. Kempner, I said, got to go to that trial. He said, okay, you can go to that trial. Well, at recess, before recess that morning, he told me, he said, there are no tickets. We had, the trial was given in 4 languages. We had speakers where the people that were the visitors to the trial, I guess you call it. If you went into the trial, you can punch whether you wanted English or French or German. So dear Dr. Kempner came in at recess time, and he said, come with me, Myrtle. And he took me back into the waiting room, and there was Emmy Goring and her daughter. So it was, I did not try to talk to him. Of course, he pretty well talk to him when I speak English.
Were they incarcerated during the trial? I wondered how he committed suicide was mine.
Yes, they were. That's another thing I should have told you. The prison was something else. I was down in the prison, and yes, they were in prison. And they each had a guard that stood outside the prison door and watched them. So we didn't want any more people committing suicide.
Tell them about your Hollywood connection. Stephen.
Oh, y'all won't believe this. Steven Spielberg got in touch with me. And well, actually, his people did. And they said, and this is important, you know, the Holocaust museums that he has one in Jerusalem, they say it's the most wonderful. There's one in New York, and there's one in California. The one in California, they just got a college to accept and put the museum in there. But with the Spielberg Museum, I got a call, and they asked me, and they brought all the equipment out to do a documentary, is the right word. Mandy, you know how I ever got there? No wonder I couldn't speak English, let alone German. But anyway, it was a documentary, and what it is, and I admire, this is show-off. I'm a member, I'm a part of that. They sent out the photographer and the cameraman and this, and the lady came in from out in Salt Lake City, and she interviewed me. And my husband, he said, you got to go sit in the kitchen because you can't be in the room when we interrogate her. Children went to New York last year, and they wanted to see the film they took, and they said, well, we can't pull out just any certain film. But what they want, and he's right, in future, you won't have people saying something happened. You will not only hear them tell what happened, you will have a picture to see who it is talking. And I think that's real good.
With the other ladies that went over.
Do you know nearly everybody's dead? I asked the Lord one day, why am I still here? They're all gone. And I don't know. I guess it was just so I could come talk to you tonight.
Probably.
Listen, y'all, I just really enjoyed talking to you. I enjoyed your listening.
Yours, all German people?
We didn't have a jury sitting as you were thinking of a jury. When they came to trial, our defendants were set up in the dock.